This is the Pharmaverse podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack, engaging leaders from the pharma universe. Hello and welcome to the Pharmaverse podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. And if you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the pharmaceutical industry, you've come to the right place, because we interview the brightest stars, the leaders from all areas of the Pharmaverse, and today's guest would certainly fit that description. We're joined today by the AVP of U.S. Medical Affairs with Merck Oncology, Melissa Mims. Now, just a quick intro. She's a PhD MBA. She started out actually in drug discovery, then moved into field medical affairs with Merck in the early 2000s. And now she's leading all of field medical with Merck Oncology. She's an amazing people manager, a creator of cultures. Melissa Mims, welcome to the Pharmaverse.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here. I love the introduction. I often wonder who you're talking about, but I guess that would be me. I just want to share as we start to get into the interview that these are actually my thoughts and not actually the views or the perspective of my employer.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, and that's an important point. And you know, I've been trying to track you down for a while. We fought through all kinds of technical difficulties, and the reason I tried so hard is I know how great of a leader you are. And I'm just curious, like, did you always want to be a people manager or not?
Really, no, I actually see myself as a behind the scenes type of individual, and I would say I'm still behind the scenes in reference to working with my leadership team. So no aspirations to be a people manager. I'm very introverted, and as such, I don't really like big crowds and really need a certain amount of time for downtime to renew. So definitely not in my spectrum of things as I think about in reference to being a people leader.
That makes sense. That makes sense. You know, you've been at the same company now for over 20 years, which is very atypical in today's world. And you've moved up into positions where in some cases you were once the peer, and then you then led the team where you were the peer. And some people listening may find themselves in that exact situation, going from peer to managing that team. What advice would you give to those individuals?
So it's a great question. As you referenced, I did grow up in the organization. And I think for advice that I would give is that it's always good to build peer-to-peer leadership. You know, there are opportunities that I think many of us have in reference to, how someone might view you as you're going through a challenging situation, or you might be coming up with an innovative idea. So wouldn't it be great if those individuals, even without you even thinking about, hey, I want to move up in my career and maybe potentially be a manager, that you just build that natural peer-to-peer leadership. And that's really what I would encourage, and that's really what I really sort of saw if I reflect back in my career. As I transitioned from being a peer to being the leader, is that what was really, I think, really refreshing is that those individuals had already transitioned to that point in their mind just because of the types of interactions that we were already having.
Give us some examples of that. I remember when we were in the pre-show discussion, you talked about like resolving a conflict with two people. How do you get that peer leadership thing going?
Get the peer leadership going. I like to say that I'm somewhat of a neutral individual, in the sense that I think that there are two sides to every story, but I also love the idea as you're thinking about a conflict, and that I'm trying to think of the one specifically that we might have talked about, but let me take it from a slightly different perspective. We actually are more, shall I say, I actually had involvement where I ended up leading probably at that time an innovative approach to a ways of working with an internal stakeholder. And not necessarily knowing that I was going to be the person that was leading, it was more or less that I simply was the person that sent the email and ended up being the leader. But I think everybody has a certain set of strengths that they bring to the table. I consider myself to be a very collaborative leader, and I think being neutral and being collaborative sort of go hand in hand. If I could use that, and I have a sense of being able to bring together different individuals across the, in this case, the organization, and so I think in the ability to be able to do that. That's not everybody's strength. Everybody, as I said, brings different strengths and talents, but that just happens to be one of mine. And being able to also see it through to fruition, dealing with whatever in this case, the innovative approach, and being able to see it through fruition and see it actually become a transformation and become a sustainable opportunity within the organization. I think it had different levels of peer leadership there as I was working across the team and being able to navigate and move it through. So I don't, what you hear me saying is not a one-time instance, Michael, in reference to peer leadership. I think it builds, depending on what your situation circumstance might be around the potential opportunity that you're being presented with.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. You said some other things that I wanted to share with the audience. I thought it was so cool. You said when you move from a peer to a manager in the same team, you have to put on a new set of ears, almost like, well, I'll let you explain it. What does that mean?
So you have to, you do put on a new set of ears. You have to listen not as a individual leader, but in the case of where I'm coming from, I now have to listen from multiple aspects of things, because I think as you move to the next level in the organization, you got to be able to see things from an enterprise perspective. Right, I always like to operate from the fact that we're one team. We might be many parts of that team, but we're essentially one team. And so having to listen not only from a team that I might have been leading, but now listen to the broader team and put that in terms of what the enterprise priorities requires you to have a different set of ears that think in some instances you probably grow those ears. Can you imagine having more than 2 ears? Right? You essentially sort of grow those ears, or those ears become larger as you move to having multiple teams that are reporting into you.
Other people that have done just what you did see the relationships with individuals actually change when you're their peer, and then all of a sudden you become their manager. The relationships change to a certain extent. Can you speak to that?
It's a good question. As I think about it, I don't really think that my relationship changed. I think what it what it did, it became a deeper uh, relationship that I had with the individuals. I always like to think of things in terms of I have their back, right? And so I established that level of credibility with them and enhanced the trust that we already had with one another by when I stepped into the role. That's why I said I'm still a behind the scenes type of individual, because I am their biggest cheerleader and I'm their biggest advocate in reference to the work that they're doing. And I would say you have to ask their perspective, but I feel like like I said, it didn't quote unquote change. It just became more enhanced and more in depth in reference to our relationship.
That makes sense. So, hey, you had their back as a peer. Now you have their back in a different role. But I liked your point where you said, you have to establish trust and credibility to the point where when you're promoted, you're almost the logical person for the role.
It is important. We use trust sometimes very, we just sort of throw the word around, but it really means a lot to individuals. And there's a part of, you hear me talk about strengths, really believe in the Clifton strengths, and a part of that exercise is really establishing trust builders and trust breakers. And so, understanding what that trust means to others and what would actually break their trust. And it's harder to actually rebuild trust, and I think you lose credibility, thus you lose areas that could be productive, not only for relationship in the organization, but as you sort of think about it, depending on where you are, the enterprise, approach. So I think it is really, really crucial to ensure you have the right level of trust. I mean, I've seen articles, and I'm sure you have too. People don't leave organizations, they actually leave managers, right? So if you don't have that level of a trust, and here again, going back to people understanding that you have their back, then they're not going to stay with you when it might be maybe not so much of a fun time in the organization, right? They're not going to stay with you. They're going to leave to find something that they might consider to be more fruitful or worthwhile for them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's think about someone that is now just a teammate, an individual contributor on a team, that there is not yet a promotion opportunity, but they want to sort of position themselves to be that logical person should an opening happen. This episode is brought to you by K. Bassman International, the leader in pharma and biotech recruiting. When pharma executives need to make critical hires, they go to the experts at K. Bassman, pharma's one-source staffing solution. Visit kbic.com. Now back to the episode. What are some specific things that that person can do to start putting themselves in position for that?
So I often think about what I would have told the younger version of me. As you mentioned, I've been in the organization and just around the industry for a long period of time. I think the best thing that one can do is to network. I believe in the power of the network and how you can create the initial visibility and show the initial interest is simply by asking, can I have an informational interview? There might be different words that you might choose to use, but that's essentially what you're asking and trying to establish that initial relationship and show interest in roles that might be beyond your current scope. So if that's not something that people, and being an introvert, it's not necessarily something I was always comfortable asking to do. So thus, what I would have told my younger self was the people that I saw around at that time in a different type of work environment where it wasn't very open, but you had the traditional office settings, was really, get to know those individuals that had those offices around, the perimeter, because they grew up to be future leaders within the organization. And if I had started to build those relationships and show my interest in reference to just having a broader level of responsibility, here again, never thinking about it from a manager level, but more of just where I could have impact in the organization, then I think I would have sort of accelerated the timeline to be able to have the level of impact that I think that currently my team is having.
Oh, I see. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Sort of get an enterprise view by interviewing people, cross-functional partners, taking the initiative to do that. And that is hard, especially if you maybe more of an introverted. You're not going to host a podcast one day, is that what you're
I
telling me?
am not going to host a podcast one day. I don't have the level of charm that you have to be able
Okay.
to do that. But like I said, I really enjoy being able to share with those that are still early in their career, or even for those that might be veterans. Small talk is hard. For individuals like myself, I've read somewhere that most CEOs are actually introverted. Uh,
I didn't even capture
right?
that. Yeah.
So you sort of listen. It's not we're not a bunch of, at least for an individual like myself. I'm not a CEO, but I'm not a big small talker. I can add to where I think there needs to be a conversation. I love to ideate, but I don't see it necessarily as small talk.
Well, I'm trying to pinpoint. I'm writing this article for Biospace about leadership styles, and I'm trying to. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to put you in a box and say this is her leadership style. So, in your own words, what is your leadership style?
Yeah, I've sort of alluded to it. So I'm a very collaborative leader. Um, I would say, with the exception of when I feel that some things might need to be in question, and or you're calling my actions into question. I think I take a slightly more direct approach to my leadership style when I'm put into various scenarios. Um, when you're a collaborative leader, people could take you for granted, right? Like you're going to agree to everything. And I think what I've seen, and it just sort of comes sort of natural to me, is that yes, I'm collaborative depending on the scenario, and then I might have to take a little bit more of a direct approach just to ensure that my voice is being heard, not from Melissa's perspective, but here again, I like to take things from a very team approach. You hear me talk about the we, not I.
Yeah.
And so I just have to speak up and be direct when it might have implications in reference to my team. Otherwise, hey, I think we can find a way to definitely make things work.
Yeah, you're willing to collaborate. And I love the we, not I. That is really something I see in a lot of leaders that make them that. And it seems like to me that the best leaders take that approach, whereas leaders that always find themselves, struggling, it's about them. But can you talk more about the we, not I?
Yes, I have found that have some ideas, but we as
Yeah,
a team have a lot of great ideas, and
love
you
it.
bring together with the we, you sort of think about it in the collective approach. As we say, the body has many parts, but working together as a collective body, I mean, can do wonderful things and have a greater level of impact. And so that's really been um, my my approach. And I'll tell you a little secret is I've worked very hard to try to minimize myself. And that might be a little bit more than what this group wants to hear. But when you're introverted and you can see that you actually are a peacock, you try to find a way to keep the feathers in. I really do. And it's a hard thing that you're trying to balance when the feathers are already out there. So since the feathers are already out there, I figured that if I have the team approach in the we, I'm really I'm really trying to find a
I
way that
love it.
maybe you don't see quite so many of the feathers,
Yeah.
but it's really also a very personal approach. Maybe some of the listeners can relate to it or not, but it doesn't take away from what I said. There's more power in reference to we, not I, but also from my own personal experience, I'm trying to minimize the peacock that has all these feathers out and is not so much of a standout.
Yeah, it's what it appears to me is it's very humble. It's not look at me, it's look at us or look at them. And I
Exactly.
like the point of minimalizing yourself. That is a big key for the best managers out there. They want to put their team in the forefront and they want to be sort of faded into the background. And then on the flip, the leaders that aren't so good, they want the limelight. And so. Well, let me
I'm
ask you
just going to
this.
laugh.
Yeah, yeah, we've all seen those, but you know, a lot of the people that I've talked to are maybe in their first managerial position, and it's sort of like a rookie quarterback. They're going to make mistakes. Can a leader's style change over time? What do you think?
It can. I think it becomes a part of. Let me restate that. I think it's a journey. I think the core of who you are and your leadership style will always be there. I think it can be enhanced or taken to the next level depending on what your situation or circumstance may be. I believe in bringing your authentic self to work. Bring my authentic self to this podcast. As you can tell, I'm a very informal individual. I'm not probably as prim and proper as most, but nevertheless, what you see is what you get. And what I would share with the listeners is always bring your authentic self into your leadership style, and that leadership style, as I said, will continue to enhance depending on the circumstances that you in. Don't try to be someone else because trying to be something that you're not, I think you'll find that here again, eventually the core person will step forward.
It's so true because sometimes people move into a leadership position and they feel like they got to take on this new persona when really they just have to be themselves and
Just be
people will follow
yourself.
that.
That's it.
Well, let's keep pulling on this thread because you and I have a lot of the same network.
Hmm.
And what I've been hearing consistently about you is how you've just created an amazing team culture. Any advice you could give to other leaders about how to create a great team culture?
So I'll take it back to what you asked me, and we sort of talked about the growing of the ears.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the things to think about as you move into higher positions is to ensure that you're listening. There might have been some things that I thought that I heard, but I heard it, as we talked about earlier, at a different level. And I think it's important to not try to boil the ocean in reference to, you might hear many things, but what are the things that you're really going to uh, prioritize and be able to really hopefully, you want to have 100% achievable rate. That might be a good target, but at least that you can mostly do based on your level of agency. And what I found is that when you do that and people really hear and understand that their voice is being heard, and they hear that you're attempting, you might not be totally successful depending on your agency, and you have that communication flow back, that really builds a tremendous amount of culture that is underlying of having trust with the organization. And so the other part that came from listening and building that trust is that helping the organization understand how you're sharing their narrative. Um, and we've worked really hard as organization to be able to share the impact and the narrative in reference to my particular team. And I would say for leaders, as you're thinking about building the culture, it's important that here again, it's not about me myself, but it's about the team approach and being able to share the narrative of the impact of the work, because then the team knows that you appreciate them and they know that others appreciate them as well. So I would say those are probably two of the core factors. And then the last one that you constantly hear me talk about is you bring your authentic self to work, which means that you bring your core talents and what you can do successfully to the organization as well. And you are not alike, so I can't expect that the individuals within the team are going to be alike. And we need the diversity in reference to thought and representation to be able to really bring that in. So that's really the three essential pieces that I think makes a really strong culture. You want the culture where people want to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And just to make sure I understand, when you were talking about listening and taking their narrative, it's almost like, they're going to give you their perspective. They're going to give you their insights, maybe from the field or whatever. And they trust that you listened and that you're going to take that to the next level up in the organization. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so yes, if I can't solve for it, right?
Yeah.
But if it's something that I or my team can solve for, we want to communicate back to them that we've closed the loop and this is the result. Some
Yeah.
of what people feel is that their voices are not heard. It goes into a black box. So we want to make sure that people understand that it's not a black box, that there are actually people listening and doing. The narrative piece is making sure that they understand that they appreciate it
Yeah.
and that the work that they're doing is carrying forth throughout the organization. That's what I mean in reference to the narrative. So you can see how, trust, I'm listening. You see the work, you see me, you see the work that I'm doing. You see me as an individual. You see all of those pieces. It has an individual and a customized approach. I believe in consistency with space, but I believe in the same time I have to be able to look at people as individuals and not just as a group of we all going to do the same thing and bring the same thing to the table.
Yeah, I see, through everything that you've talked about, I see the consistency of listening that makes the people feel appreciated and therefore they want to trust you. You do have their back. That's genuine. You're the authentic self when you're there. And last question, and this is a selfish one. As a recruiter, I want to know the Melissa Mims secrets of hiring and interviewing, any best practices that you could share. In the pre-show discussion, you talked about, listening and really getting someone understanding what motivates a person. But I won't put words in your mouth, but what are some of the Melissa Mims secrets there?
Yeah, so that's I think that would be pretty much it. I mean, come on, you've been in this business. Individuals that are looking to join various organizations, we know for the most part that they fit most of the core requirements. So, what I found has been whether or not they're fit for the culture, right? And it should be the same evaluation that the individual on the other side is also looking at. Is this the right culture that I want to be a part of? For someone who's been at an organization for over 20 years, people often ask me, why do I stay? And you have to understand, what are your motivations? Is that because you believe in the mission and the vision of the organization, and you have, of course, good management that you feel that you can trust? Or do you have other motives around that? And I do ask people when we interview them, why do you want to come to this particular organization? Right? Because they generally have been at other organizations. And understanding what really inspires and motivates individuals, I think, is a really good tip beyond the tactical piece of them actually being able to do the job. Because here again, for all the things that we've talked about, Michael, I think that really sort of builds into the longevity of whether individuals stay with an organization or the manager or not.
Yeah, if they align with the mission and they really align with the mission and feel it in their heart, they're gonna ride the roller coaster that is inevitable, but they're gonna stay a long time, and that's why you have such longevity on your team. Makes sense.
I hope so. I hope
Well,
so.
sadly, that is the end of the time for the show, but we are leaving not only inspired, but well informed. So, on behalf of everyone in the Pharmaverse, I just want to thank you for your time and insights.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share. I hope it's helpful to someone along their journey.
It certainly has been to me. So, Melissa Mims, thank you so much. We have many more great leaders lined up for you. So, please follow the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on the Pharmaverse podcast. Make sure you subscribe below so you don't miss any leadership insights. Like and comment. I would love to hear from you. We'll see you on the next episode of Pharmaverse.